They say money talks, but real power doesn't raise its voice. It simply moves the world around it. On a bleak, rain-soaked Tuesday at Teterboro Airport, a man in a $5,000 tailored suit glanced at a woman in a hoodie and saw nothing more than an inconvenience. He didn't see the CEO. He didn't see the owner of the jet. All he saw was a seat he wanted, and a black woman he assumed he could push aside. He made her move. He dropped into her seat. He fastened his belt with a smug grin, confident in his entitlement. But he overlooked one critical truth. You don't shove the captain off her own ship. And when a billionaire's patience finally snaps, the fallout is brutal. The jet froze mid-runway, and karma delivered a blow that destroyed this man's career, his reputation, and ultimately his freedom. This is the story of Porter Walsh, and the day he picked the wrong woman to provoke. The rain at Teterboro Airport didn't simply fall, it assaulted the ground. It came down in a hard, cold October torrent, turning the runway into a shimmering sheet of steel and shadow. For Jocelyn Banks, the rhythmic thrum of rain on the SUV's roof was the first moment of quiet she had tasted in 72 relentless hours. She sat slouched in the back of the Escalade, her temple pressed against the chilled window. She didn't resemble the Forbes cover star she was. She didn't look like the woman who had just locked down the most aggressive logistics merger Silicon Valley had seen in a decade. She looked hollow, the silhouette of someone running on fumes. She wore an oversized charcoal hoodie from a college she hadn't set foot in for 20 years, black leggings long past their prime, and sneakers that had endured more abuse than any celebrity stylist would allow. Her hair was yanked back into an unpolished, no-nonsense bun, her face scrubbed, clean of makeup, exposing the deep fatigue carved beneath her eyes. "We're at the FBO, Miss Banks," her driver said softly. Kevin, a huge, quiet man, never spoke more than necessary. "Thanks, Kevin," Jocelyn murmured, her voice rough around the edges. "Just the backpack today." She reached for the worn leather bag at her feet. A Hermes Hack 40, a piece worth more than an average sedan, though she had battered it so brutally over 5 years that it softened. Scuffed exterior could pass as a thrift store rescue to anyone without a trained eye. That was intentional. Jocelyn Banks, CEO of Meridian Dynamics, had spent a lifetime under a microscope. When she traveled, she preferred to disappear. She stepped out into the sharp wind. Inside the fixed-base operator terminal, the familiar brand of subdued chaos that followed the ultra-wealthy buzzed all around her. Men in Loro Piana coats stormed about with phones pressed to their ears. Women with surgical precision sculpting their features perched beside immaculate Louis Vuitton luggage on buttery leather sofas. Jocelyn slipped past all of them. She wasn't flying commercial, and she wasn't flying standard charter. She was boarding the Osprey. The Osprey, a Gulfstream G950ER, a $65 million work of art built to nearly break the sound barrier, was managed by a private aviation firm but owned through a blind trust. A trust under Jocelyn's control. She crossed the tarmac, the wind tugging violently at her hoodie strings. Head down. Just get to San Francisco. Just a glass of scotch, a blanket, and 10 uninterrupted hours of sleep before Monday's board meeting. "Good afternoon, ma'am." The flight attendant greeted her at the stairs. Lydia, she'd flown with Jocelyn more times than she could count, knew the protocol. No small talk. No titles. Just peace. "Hey, Lydia," Jocelyn said as she climbed. "Nasty weather. Captain Ali says we'll get through the turbulence in about 10 minutes. Smooth skies after that," Lydia replied with her warm, polished smile. "Your Glenfiddich 30 is already poured." "You're a lifesaver," Jocelyn sighed. The cabin of the G950ER was designed for pure serenity. Cream leather, mahogany accents, gold hardware that whispered luxury rather than screamed it. Jocelyn made her way to seat 1A, the forward left single seat, her usual spot. It was her spot. It offered the deepest privacy and the clearest view straight to the cockpit door. She let her heavy bag drop to the floor, slipped off her sneakers, and pulled her legs up into the seat, tightening the hoodie around her knees like a shield. Lydia handed her the crystal glass. Jocelyn took a slow sip of the burning amber scotch, closed her eyes, and allowed herself a rare moment of stillness. But this wasn't a private flight. Meridian Dynamics had a long-standing policy of offsetting operational costs by leasing any unused seats on the corporate shuttle to a roster of pre-approved partners. Today, 3 of those seats had been sold. Jocelyn didn't care who booked them, as long as they kept to themselves. She was drifting toward the edge of sleep when the piece cracked open. "I don't care what the contract says. Make the damn numbers work, Jerry." I'm not paying you to tell me it's illegal. I'm paying you to find the loophole. The voice thundered through the cabin. Loud, abrasive, drenched in the kind of entitlement that made Jocelyn's jaw tighten. She opened one eye. Clomping up the stairs was a man who looked like he'd been assembled in a facility that specialized in manufacturing Wall Street antagonists. Tall, broad, with slicked-back blonde hair losing its battle against a receding hairline, he wore a navy pinstripe suit tailored half a size too small and a gold Rolex Submariner that screamed for attention. His iPhone 15 Pro Max was plastered to his ear as he barked orders. This was Porter Walsh. Jocelyn didn't recognize the face, but she knew the archetype. A man who believed the decibel level his voice directly reflected the sharpness of his mind. Behind him followed a woman who looked utterly drained. Beautiful, wrapped in Chanel from head to toe, but with hollow eyes that hinted at a life lived on someone else's schedule. She carried a tiny dog in a designer carrier and moved with the softness of someone who had learned to keep quiet. "No, I'm boarding now." Porter snapped into the phone as he stepped inside, dragging in the scent of damp wool and aggressive cologne. "I'll call you from the air. Just get it done." He ended the call and scanned the cabin with a condescending sweep, as though grading its cleanliness. His gaze skimmed right over the plush empty seats and landed on Jocelyn in 1A, curled comfortably in her hoodie, drink in hand, looking more like someone heading home after a warehouse shift than the billionaire owner of the jet. Porter halted. His frown deepened. He glanced at his boarding pass, then at her. He didn't bother checking the seat assignment. He checked his prejudice instead. "Excuse me," Porter said. Not politely. It was the tone reserved for chastising staff over forgotten condiments. Jocelyn opened both eyes. She didn't budge. She didn't blink. She simply looked at him. "Yes." She replied, her voice steady. "You're in my spot," Porter declared, waving his phone as if it were a badge of authority. Jocelyn looked around the nearly empty cabin. 12 seats. 11 available. "There are plenty of open seats, sir. And as far as I know, 1A is assigned to me." Porter let out a short, caustic laugh, the kind that held no humor. "Assigned? Listen, sweetheart, I don't know who stuck you up here. Maybe the cleaning crew gets a break before takeoff, sure, but I booked the priority bulkhead. I need the legroom for business." Lydia was still in the galley, setting up the welcome tray. She hadn't heard any of this yet. "I'm comfortable where I am," Jocelyn replied, taking another sip of her scotch, "and I'm not moving." Porter's face flushed a deep, irritated red that clashed with the stripes on his tie. He was not accustomed to being refused. Certainly not by someone who looked like Jocelyn in that moment. "I don't think you understand," Porter said, stepping in closer, crossing the invisible line of her personal space. "I paid $12,000 for this seat. I am a platinum partner with a brokerage. Now grab your little bag and move to the back where you belong, or I swear I'll have you thrown off this plane before the engines even power up." The air in the cabin shifted. In an instant, the luxury jet transformed from a sanctuary of wealth into the tightening ring of a cage match. Jocelyn felt that familiar heat ignite in her chest. Not fear, but the steady, slow-building fire of a warrior bracing for combat. She set her glass down with measured calm. "You really don't want to do this," she said quietly. "Oh, I really do," Porter shot back with a sneer. The silence that followed was thick enough to choke on, broken only by the low growl of the APU spooling up outside. Rain hammered the curved windows, warping the view beyond, turning the cabin into a suspended world where social norms dissolved and only dominance mattered. Porter Walsh loomed over Jocelyn, widening his stance, filling the aisle like a barrier made of arrogance. He waited for the flinch, for the apology, for the scramble to obey the submission he believed belonged to him by virtue of birthright and a swollen bank account. Jocelyn did not flinch. She evaluated him with the same clinical distance she used in hostile negotiation. Risk assessment, male, mid-40s, combative personality, clear narcissistic markers, likely middle management or low-tier partner at a high-volume firm, someone who had tasted power but not earned enough of it to feel secure. Volume over substance, ego over logic. Real authority didn't need theatrics. Conflict value negligible. Peace value significant. She could end this with a single call. One number to the tail number manager and security would pull him off the aircraft in handcuffs if she demanded it. But that would take 20 minutes. It would require formal reports. It would delay takeoff. And she had to be in San Francisco before sunrise for a 7 a.m. merger briefing. "Is there a problem here?" Lydia's voice floated from the galley. Her polished smile was strained. She'd sensed the storm instantly. Her gaze flicked from Porter's flushed fury to Jocelyn's unbothered composure. Lydia knew exactly who Jocelyn was, and as she inhaled to address her as Miss Banks, Jocelyn gave the slightest signal, a barely there shake of her head. Don't. Jocelyn had no appetite for theatrics, no patience for the "do you know who I am" script. It was tacky, loud, and pointless, especially with someone who would and believe the truth even if she engraved it onto his forehead. Yes, there is a problem. Porter barked before Lydia could speak. He spun toward her, jabbing a finger in Jocelyn's direction. I booked 1A. This passenger refuses to give up the premium seat. I have work to do. I need the table space. Move her. Lydia glanced down at her manifest. Sir, seating on this charter is open, but nothing, Porter snapped. I'm the managing director at Helios Capital. I generated $40 million in revenue last quarter. I'm not sitting near the engines like some intern. I want this seat. He whipped back to Jocelyn, eyes sharp with disdain. And I don't know how you ended up here, employee discount, raffle winner, whatever, but you're disrupting paying customers. Behind them, his wife settled uneasily into seat 2A. Beautiful, composed, but with hollowed eyes. She hid behind a magazine, her silence speaking volumes: compliance, exhaustion, fear of rocking the boat. Jocelyn studied Porter's face, the pulsing veins, the frantic need to assert dominance. And she understood this wasn't about legroom, it wasn't about the seat. It was about control. If she stayed in 1A, this man would dedicate the next 6 hours to making her miserable. He'd kick the seat. He'd rant on the phone. He'd provoke, taunt, and needle her relentlessly. Peace weighed more than pride today. Jocelyn exhaled a long, tired breath. Fine, she said softly. She rose. Porter's grin split wide, smug, triumphant, juvenile. The grin of a bully who believed he'd won something meaningful. Smart choice, he muttered. Jocelyn picked up her worn Hermes bag, slipped her sneakers into her hand. She didn't look at Porter. She looked straight through him. Lydia, Jocelyn said quietly, I'll take the rear seat. It's fine. But ma'am, Lydia stammered, eyes wide with horror. She knew damn well Jocelyn was the reason this aircraft even had fuel in its tanks. It's fine, Lydia, Jocelyn repeated, firmer this time. Let's just get wheels up. I want to sleep. She stepped past Porter. He didn't shift an inch. She had to angle her shoulder and squeeze past his bulk. As she slid by, he leaned in, lowering his voice into a whisper sharpened for insult. Next time, fly commercial if you can't handle the hierarchy, sweetheart. Jocelyn ignored him. She kept walking, heading straight for the very back of the jet, near the lavatory door and the baggage hold access. There was a 3-seat bench there. Comfortable, yes, but unquestionably the least desirable place on the plane, right beside the engine hum. She sank down onto the bench, dropped her bag to the floor, and glanced forward. She watched as Porter slid into seat 1A, seat with the smug relish of a child stealing a throne. He made an exaggerated show of wiping down the armrests with a sanitizing wipe, scrubbing at the spot where Jocelyn had been moments earlier. The disgust on his face was theatrical. Then he snapped his fingers. Stewardess, another drink. Vodka tonic. And take this glass away, he said, flicking his hand toward Jocelyn's unfinished scotch. It's cluttering my workspace. Lydia approached the back, her face pale. She crouched down beside Jocelyn, voice low and trembling with restrained fury. Ms. Banks, she whispered, please let me call the captain. We can have him removed. This is unacceptable. He has no idea, Lydia, Jocelyn said, gently placing a hand on her arm. I am tired. My head feels like a drill bit is spinning behind my eye. If we stop to kick him off, we miss our slot. That means another hour stuck on the ground. I just want to go home. But he's awful, Lydia hissed. He's a rounding error, Jocelyn murmured, closing her eyes and leaning back against the bulkhead. He's variable I'm choosing to ignore. Let him have the seat. It's just a chair. Pour his drink. Let's go. Lydia hesitated, then slowly nodded. You have the patience of a saint, Miss Banks. No, Jocelyn said softly as the engines spooled up, their pitch rising toward a high mechanical scream. I have the patience of a predator who knows she's already won. I just don't feel like eating yet. The Gulfstream taxied out, rain streaking across the windows in long silver smears. Up in 1A, Porter Walsh was already laughing loudly into his phone. Yeah, I handled it. Just had to assert a little authority. You know how it is. Some people just need to be reminded of their place. Jocelyn slipped in her noise-cancelling earbuds. She cued a white noise track. She pulled her hood over her eyes. The jet rolled onto the active runway. The throttles surged forward. Acceleration slammed her gently back into the bench. V1. Rotate. The jet lifted, slicing through the storm and banking west. For 2 hours, the flight passed without incident. Porter drank 3 vodkas. He snapped at Lydia about the temperature of the warm nuts. He complained about the Wi-Fi speed. He strutted around his little airborne kingdom as though he owned it. Jocelyn slept at least as much as she could, but around hour 3, somewhere high above the plains of Nebraska, Porter grew bored. He stood, stretched theatrically, and glanced toward the rear. He saw the figure in the hoodie, dozing on the bench. He saw the worn leather bag on the floor. Something about it snagged his attention. Porter walked down the aisle. He wasn't headed to the bathroom. He was headed straight for her. Lydia stepped out of the galley. "Sir, can I help you?" "Just stretching my legs," he said, pushing past her without slowing. He stopped before Jocelyn, staring down at her resting form. His gaze shifted to the Hermes Hack 40 on the floor. Porter recognized brands, at least he thought he did. He knew what a pristine Birkin looked like. He saw the scuffs, the softened leather, the worn handles. And in his mind, that meant only one thing: fake. Cheap, counterfeit, a street-level knockoff from some back-alley stall. He nudged Jocelyn's foot with the tip of his shoe. Jocelyn snapped awake instantly. Her eyes flew open, sharp and alert. She yanked out one earbud. "What?" she demanded, her voice edged like a blade. "You're blocking the baggage access." Porter lied smoothly. "I need to grab my coat." "Your coat is in the front closet," Jocelyn replied without hesitation. "I watched Lydia hang it there." Porter gave a smug little smirk. "Pretty sure I left my wallet in it, and I'm pretty sure it ended up in the hold." "It's not," Jocelyn said flatly. Porter's voice jumped an octave. "Are you calling me a liar? You know, you've really got an attitude problem. I tried being nice letting you stay on this flight." Jocelyn sat up slowly. The air at the back of the plane suddenly felt thin, pressurized. "You let me," she repeated, tasting the words. "Yeah," Porter said, puffing himself up. "I could have had you thrown off. You should show some gratitude." His eyes slid down to her bag. "Nice knockoff, by the way. My wife has the real one. You can tell by the stitching. Yours is pathetic." He kicked her bag hard. It skidded across the aisle, slammed into the bathroom door with a dull, accusing thud. Something inside Jocelyn Banks shifted. Not her patience, not her spirit, those were unbreakable. But her determination to stay invisible cracked clean down the middle. That bag had been a gift from her father before he died. Every scuff was a memory of the trips they'd taken together. Jocelyn stared at the bag. Then she looked at Porter. She rose. At 5 feet 9 inches she wasn't towering, but in that moment she seemed to occupy the entire fuselage. She shrugged off her hoodie, revealing a plain black t-shirt underneath. On her wrist glowed a PC Philippe Nautilus in rose gold, subtle, quiet, but unmistakable to anyone who knew its worth, more than Porter's house. Porter's eyes locked on the watch, his brows knotted. The math wasn't mathing, hoodie plus that watch. His brain sputtered. "Sit down," Jocelyn said. Her voice wasn't loud, it rumbled from somewhere deep and dangerous. "Excuse me?" Porter blustered. "I said sit down. Go back to your seat. Don't talk to me again. Don't even look at me again." "Oh yeah," Porter laughed, but it trembled now. "Or what? You'll report me." "I know the owners of this charter company. I know the people signing the checks." Jocelyn just watched him. A slow, chilling smile spread across her face. "You know the people who signed the checks," she repeated softly. "Damn right. Meridian Dynamics. I know the VP of sales." "Good," Jocelyn said. "That'll make this easier." She slipped a hand into her pocket, pulled out her phone, and pressed the side button 3 times. She didn't unlock it, didn't speak. It wasn't a call. It was a code. Up in the cockpit, a small blue light blinked to life on Captain Ali's dashboard. The owner priority signal, meaning report to the cabin immediately. Captain Ali, former Navy fighter pilot. 20 years in the sky, shot his co-pilot a look. "You have the comm." "I have the comm," the co-pilot confirmed. O'Malley unbuckled, straightened his hat, opened the cockpit door, and stepped into the cabin. Porter brightened like rescue had arrived. "Finally. Captain, this woman is harassing me, threatening me. I want her restrained." Captain O'Malley didn't even glance at him. Porter might as well have been a shadow. Instead, the captain walked directly to Jocelyn, stopped before her, and stood at attention. "Miss Banks," he said, voice respectful, steady. "We received your signal. Is everything all right?" Porter froze mid-sentence. His mouth hung open. He swung his gaze between the captain and the woman he'd just insulted. "Miss Banks." Jocelyn looked from the captain to Porter. "Captain," she said calmly, "I'd like to divert." "Divert, ma'am?" "Yes," Jocelyn replied, locking eyes with Porter's now terrified face. "I don't feel safe with this passenger on board. He's aggressive, he's intoxicated, and he just assaulted my property." "Hey," Porter yelped. I just moved it. "Where would you like to divert to, Miss Banks?" The captain asked, already pulling out his tablet. "We're over Colorado," the captain said. "Denver's 20 minutes out." "No," Jocelyn said immediately. "I don't want Denver. I want to go back." "Back?" the captain asked. "Back to Teterboro," Jocelyn clarified. "Take us home to New York." Porter's face drained of color. "You can't do that. I have a meeting in San Francisco. You can't just turn a plane around. Do you know how much that costs?" "Thousands of dollars." Jocelyn stepped toward him, closing the gap until he could feel the cold precision in her presence. "Mr. Walsh," she said, voice frozen solid. "It costs roughly $12,000 an hour to operate this aircraft. Turning around, flying back, and landing will run approximately $50,000 in fuel and fees." She held his gaze. "I have that sitting in my checking account." "Do you?" Then she turned to the captain. "Bank the bird around, O'Malley. We're taking out the trash." A Gulfstream G650R usually turns with elegance, smooth, barely noticeable, but Captain Ali didn't bother with elegance. He snapped off the autopilot and rolled the aircraft sharply left. The sudden G-force slammed Porter Walsh against the cabin floor, his knee buckling as the horizon outside the windows twisted like a knife. "We are turning," Captain O'Malley announced over the PA, his voice cold and clipped. "Returning to KBB. Estimated arrival, 3 hours, 40 minutes. Porter scrambled upright, clawing at the headrest of seat 2A. His face contorted disbelief, melting into raw panic. "You're insane," he shouted, spittle spraying. He stared at Jocelyn, who was calmly fastening the clasp of her watch. "You're actually doing it. You turned the plane around. Do you have any idea what this does to my schedule? I have a pitch with Silicon Valley Venture Group at 9 a.m. If I miss that, I lose the portfolio." Jocelyn didn't spare him a glance. She turned to Lydia. "Lydia, is seat 1A available now?" Lydia, who looked like she was witnessing a religious miracle, nodded rapidly. "Yes, Miss Banks. It's wide open." "Good," Jocelyn said. "I'll take it. Mr. Walsh can enjoy the jump seat in the back. Since he's so invested in hierarchy, he can sit where non-priority passengers belong. I am not sitting in the back." Porter roared. He snatched up his phone. "I'm calling my lawyer. I'm calling the charter company. I'm getting you banned from every airport on the continent." He jabbed at the screen. Then again, and again his face crumpled. The Wi-Fi icon was gray dead. "Why is the Wi-Fi down?" he barked. Jocelyn slid elegantly into seat 1A, the throne he'd kicked her from earlier. She stretched out, unhurried, reveling in the legroom he'd tried to deny her. She tapped the recline button, letting the seat melt back. "It's my plane, Porter," she said, voice silky and lethal. "I own the router. I own the satellite uplink. And I just turned them off." Porter stared at his phone now, nothing more than a shiny paperweight. You own the plane," he whispered. "Meridian Dynamics owns the plane," Jocelyn corrected, opening her laptop. "I own Meridian Dynamics, which means technically," she looked up at him, eyes deadly calm. "You are trespassing in my living room." She typed a short command, then raised her gaze again. "And you're disturbing the peace. Go to the back. Sit on the jump seat. Buckle up. If you say another word to me or to Lydia, I will have the captain drop cabin pressure to 10,000 feet and finish this flight in turbulence-heavy airspace. Don't test me." Porter turned desperately to his wife in seat 2A. She shrank back, arms around her dog, refusing to meet his eyes. "Honey," Porter pleaded, voice cracking. Tell her who I am." His wife, Catherine, who had spent a decade swallowing his tantrums, finally looked up. Her eyes shimmered with tears, but her voice was steady. "Go to the back, Porter." Catherine whispered, "You've done enough." Porter glanced around the cabin and realized the truth. He had no allies left. The pilot was against him. The flight attendant despised him. His wife was embarrassed by him, and the woman in the hoodie, the woman he'd mocked, belittled, and kicked a bag at, was the one who controlled the sky. He made the long walk to the back. 40 feet of polished cabin floor felt like a mile of humiliation. He sat on the jump seat by the bathroom, the exact same cramped spot where Jocelyn had been earlier. The engine noise was harsher back there, a vibrating hum that rattled straight through him. For the next 3.5 hours, the cabin remained in absolute, crushing silence. Jocelyn reviewed her merger documents with cool efficiency. She sipped sparkling water. She accepted the warm nuts Lydia brought with a quiet nod. Not once, not a single time, did she glance toward the back. Meanwhile, Porter seethed in misery. He found 2 miniature vodka bottles in a galley drawer and drained them before Lydia smacked his hand away from grabbing a third. He paced. He sweated. He checked his watch compulsively every 30 seconds. He did the math. If they landed at Teterboro at 6 p.m. Eastern, he'd miss the last commercial flight to San Francisco. He'd miss the meeting. "It's fine," he muttered to himself. "I'll fix it on the ground. I'll sue her for unlawful imprisonment. I'll spin the story. I'm Porter Walsh. I always win." But when the plane began descending, banking smoothly over the Hudson with New York City glittering like spilled jewels below, a cold knot twisted in his gut. The jet wasn't heading for the usual very important person arrival point. It was taxiing toward a remote stand, and through the rain-smeared window, Porter saw something that made his blood freeze. Flashing red and blue lights, 3 police cruisers, and a black SUV with federal plates, waiting specifically for them. The Gulf Stream rolled to a stop, the engines winding down from a high whine to a dying hum. Inside the cabin, the silence became suffocating. "Stay seated." Captain Ali's voice echoed over the intercom. "Authorities are boarding the aircraft." Porter sprang up from the jump seat. "Authorities? For what?" "Because I was rude." "That's not a crime." He stormed toward the front. Catherine clutched the dog tight. "We're leaving," Porter insisted. "I'll talk to them. I know the police chief in Jersey." But when he tried to shove past the galley, Captain O'Malley was already stationed at the main door, arms folded across his broad chest. "Step back, Mr. Walsh," Ali warned. The cabin door hissed, rotated, and opened. Cold New Jersey air rushed in. 2 Port Authority officers climbed the stairs. Behind them came a man in a suit FBI. "Which one is Porter Walsh?" the agent asked, irritation in every syllable. "No one enjoys being dragged to a rainy tarmac at dusk." "That would be him," Jocelyn said calmly from seat 1A. She hadn't moved. She hadn't even unbuckled. She simply lifted a hand and pointed at the sweaty man in the Navy suit. "Mr. Walsh," the agent said as he entered the cabin, "I'm Agent Miller. Please step forward and keep your hands visible. This is ridiculous." Porter yelled, but he obeyed, raising his hands. "She hijacked the plane. She kidnapped me. I want to press charges." Agent Miller didn't even blink. "Mr. Walsh, we have a report from the captain of interference with a flight crew, intimidation of passengers, and destruction of personal property aboard an aircraft. Under 49 U.S. Code, interference with flight crew members and attendants is a federal offense." "Interference? I just wanted a drink. I just wanted my seat." Porter stammered desperately. He turned toward Jocelyn, pleading, Tell them, this is all a misunderstanding." Jocelyn slowly rotated her chair toward him. Her expression was calm, eerily calm. A terrifying neutrality settled in her eyes as she looked at him. "You kicked my bag," Jocelyn said evenly. "You threatened the crew. And you ignored direct orders from the captain during an in-air dispute. That's not you being a jerk. That's a felony." The officers stepped in. They didn't use gentle restraint. They spun Porter around so fast his chest smacked the galley counter. The sharp click-click of the metal cuffs echoed through the polished cabin like a verdict. "You can't arrest me," Porter shrieked as they dragged him toward the door. "I'm a managing director. I make more in a week than you make in a year." "Catherine, call the lawyer." "Catherine." Porter twisted his neck to look back at his wife. Catherine was standing in the aisle, dog carrier in hand, watching her husband handcuffed, rain-soaked and red with rage, being marched off a private jet he had pretended to control. "Catherine," Porter pleaded, "come with me." Catherine looked to the FBI agent. "Officer, am I under arrest?" "No, ma'am," Agent Miller said. "Captain's report identifies Mr. Walsh as the sole aggressor. You're free to go." Catherine nodded. Then she looked at her husband. "I'm not coming, Porter," she whispered. What? His eyes ballooned. I'm going to my mother's in Connecticut. I'm taking the car. You can call your lawyer yourself. I'm done. Catherine. But the officers were already pulling him down the stairs. Porter kept yelling, spitting curses into the cold rain, his $5,000 suit plastered to his skin. They shoved him into the back of a squad car, slamming the door shut. Jocelyn watched through the window, calm as ever. She lifted her glass and took a slow sip of water. Is he gone? She asked. He is off the aircraft, Miss Banks, Captain Ulley confirmed as he closed the door and locked it, and his luggage has been offloaded to the tarmac. Good, Jocelyn said. She looked at Catherine, who stood trembling in the middle of the cabin, guilt twisting her face. I'm so sorry, Catherine choked, tears spilling freely now. I'm so sorry, Miss Banks. I should have spoken up. I was scared of him. Jocelyn's expression softened. She wasn't cruel, just decisive. She unbuckled her belt and stood, stepping toward Catherine. It's not your fault he's a narcissist, Jocelyn said gently. Do you have a ride to Connecticut? I can call an Uber. I don't want to trouble anyone. Jocelyn shook her head. My driver, Kevin, is outside. He was waiting for me, but I'm heading back to San Francisco. He'll take you to Connecticut on me. You'd do that? After what he did? He did it. You didn't, Jocelyn said. Go start your life. Looks like you need a fresh one. Catherine broke down, completely relief. Grief, gratitude all tangled together. She thanked Jocelyn over and over, then hurried down the stairs to the waiting black SUV. Silence finally settled into the cabin. Only Jocelyn and Lydia remained. Lydia, Jocelyn said, sitting back down in seat 1A. Yes, Miss Banks, we lost our departure slot, didn't we? Yes, ma'am. ATC says we're on a 2-hour hold before we can continue to SFO. Jocelyn sighed, glancing at the empty seat Porter once occupied. That's fine, she said. Get the cleaning crew on board. I want this cabin scrubbed. I don't want to smell his cologne when we take off. Yes, ma'am. And Lydia, yes, open the Glenfiddich again. I believe I finally earned that drink while the jet sat grounded, awaiting a new clearance. Jocelyn pulled out her phone. The Wi-Fi connection was restored. She opened her email, started a new message addressed to the board of directors at Helios Capital. Subject, formal complaint regarding Porter Walsh. Immediate termination of contract. She began typing. She didn't just want him thrown off her airplane. She wanted him out of her industry entirely. But as she typed, a realization crept in. The story wasn't finished. Porter Walsh was the type of man who didn't fall quietly. He wasn't going to sit in a cell and reflect. He was going to fight, burning everything he could on his way down. And Jocelyn Banks, she was ready for war. Down at the precinct, Porter was burning his single phone call, and he wasn't dialing a lawyer. He was dialing a tabloid reporter. I have a story, Porter hissed into the receiver, shivering inside his soaked suit. About Jocelyn Banks, about Meridian Dynamics. She was drunk. She was abusive. She hijacked a plane. I want to ruin her. The war had officially begun. The morning sun over San Francisco Bay was blindingly bright, but inside the boardroom of Meridian Dynamics, everything felt suffocating and dim. Jocelyn Banks sat at the head of a 20-foot polished oak table. She hadn't slept a minute. She had showered, pulled on a crisp, white power suit, downed 3 espressos, yet exhaustion throbbed behind her eyes like a pulse. At the far end of the room, a wall-sized screen displayed a headline from the Daily Chronicle, a tabloid with reach far bigger than its integrity. The bold serif letters screamed, "Mile-high madness. Tech CEO hijacks own plane. Kidnaps Wall Street exec in drunken rage beneath." It was a blurry photo of Jocelyn from a charity event 3 years ago, chosen carefully because she looked flushed and intense. Beside it sat a clean-cut, polished headshot of Porter Walsh, looking every bit the innocent, wounded professional. "It's trending," said Marcus, her VP of PR, looking like he might be sick. "It's #1 on 10th. It's all over TikTok." "The narrative is already poisoned, Jocelyn." He reached the press first. Jocelyn stared at the screen, jaw clenched. Porter had wasted 0 time after making bail at 2 a.m. The interference charges were still pending, but his lawyer was good and his lies were even better. He had run straight to Barry Holt, a reporter famous for hit pieces targeting powerful women. The article was a masterpiece of fabricated victimhood. According to Mr. Walsh, a respected managing director at Helios Capital, the flight had begun normally until Miss Banks, apparently intoxicated on vintage scotch, turned hostile. She demanded I move seats so she could stretch out, he claimed. When I refused, she became verbally aggressive. She intimidated the crew. She forced the pilot to divert, effectively kidnapping me and my wife. It was terrifying. I thought we were going to crash. He forgot the part where he kicked my bag, Jocelyn said coolly, and the part where he called me sweetheart and told me to sit in the back. The truth isn't the point right now, Marcus said, tapping nervously at his tablet. The stock is down 4% in pre-market. The board is panicking. They're demanding an emergency ethics review. Jocelyn, they're saying you were drunk on a corporate asset. That violates the bylaws. Jocelyn turned her chair toward the window, watching fog curl over the Golden Gate Bridge. She knew exactly what Porter was doing. Davo deny, attack and reverse victim and offender. He knew he was in trouble for interfering with the flight, so he was trying to obliterate her credibility before the legal system got to him. If he made himself look like a trembling victim, a jury might just believe him. He wants a payout, Jocelyn murmured. He wants me to buy his silence. And maybe we should, Marcus said weakly. A brief statement. A donation to a charity of his choice, then an NDA, just to stop the bleeding. Jocelyn turned back, eyes sharp as glass. Marcus, she said, do you know why I named this company Meridian? No, ma'am, because a meridian is the line that divides day from night. A clear, definitive line. Her voice hardened, and he just crossed it. She stood. Release a statement. Short and clean. Meridian Dynamics denies all allegations and has full confidence in the legal process. Nothing more. That's it. Marcus blinked. But he's obliterating your reputation. Let him, Jocelyn said, picking up her phone. Let him talk. Let him go on every show that'll book him. Let him file every lawsuit. Let him swear under oath that his story is the truth. But why? Jocelyn smiled, a cold, lethal smile that didn't touch her eyes, because the G650ER has a cabin management system. It records audio and video for liability during charter operations. Porter thinks it's just my word against his. Marcus froze. You have a recording. I have a recording, Jocelyn confirmed. But we aren't releasing it yet. Marcus looked baffled. Why not? We could end this today. No. Jocelyn said, striding toward the door. If I release it now, he just looks like a jerk. I want him to commit perjury. I want him to file a false police report. I want him to sue me for $50 million based on a lie. I want him to dig the hole so deep that when I finally kick the ladder away, he never climbs out. She pulled open the door. Get the legal team ready, Marcus. We're going to let him think he's winning. 1 week later, the trap was baited, and Porter Walsh had swallowed it whole. Emboldened by Jocelyn's silence, Porter launched himself into a self-righteous media tour. He showed up on morning talk shows looking somber, wounded, traumatized. He gave interviews to business magazines, painting himself as the noble defender of the everyday executive, standing up against the woke, out-of-control elite. He filed a civil lawsuit against Jocelyn Banks and Meridian Dynamics for $75 million, claiming defamation, false imprisonment, emotional distress, and loss of future earnings. The loss of future earnings claim was his keystone. Porter insisted that because Jocelyn had diverted the plane, he missed a crucial meet with the Silicon Valley Venture Group, costing him a potential $10 million bonus. Now came the deposition. The conference room in a Manhattan high-rise was painfully neutral glass, steel, the faint hum of air vents. On one side sat Porter Walsh, smug in a freshly tailored suit, surrounded by a squadron of aggressive attorneys. On the other sat Jocelyn Banks, no entourage. Just her general counsel, Roger, a quiet man, with the demeanor of an accountant and the brain of a guillotine. No cameras, just a court reporter, fingers flying. Mr. Walsh, Roger began, adjusting his glasses. You've claimed that Miss Banks was the aggressor on the flight, that she was intoxicated and unreasonable. That is correct, Porter said, leaning toward the microphone. She was out of control. I was simply trying to work. And you testified, Roger continued, flipping through a binder, that you never used derogatory language, never touched her belongings, never refused a direct order from the captain. Absolutely not. Porter lied smoothly. I'm a professional. I respect authority. I was the one attempting to de-escalate the situation. Jocelyn didn't react. She was quietly sketching on a notepad, not even glancing at him. And finally, Roger said, you're claiming $75 million in damages because you missed a meeting with the Silicon Valley Venture Group. Correct? Yes, Porter snapped, puffing himself up. That was the deal of a lifetime. My portfolio was ready. They were ready to sign. Because of Miss Banks' tantrum, I missed the window. They pulled the offer. Roger simply looked at Jocelyn. Jocelyn set her notepad down, closed it, lifted her eyes to Porter. "Mr. Walsh," she said softly, "do you know who owns the Silicon Valley Venture Group?" Porter scoffed. "Some investor consortium." "What does it matter?" "It matters," Jocelyn said, "because SVVG is a wholly owned subsidiary of Meridian Dynamics." The room froze. The court reporter's keys paused just for a heartbeat. Porter blinked. "What?" "I bought them 6 months ago," Jocelyn continued. "It's a shell company I used to acquire logistics startups quietly, without inflating market prices." She leaned in. "So the meeting you were flying to, the people you were going to pitch, they work for me. You were coming to ask me for money, Porter. You just didn't know it was me." Porter's face drained of color. His lawyers scrambled through folders, whispering frantically. "And here's the best part," Jocelyn said, sliding one sheet of paper across the table. "I had my team pull the internal logs. There was no meeting scheduled with you. SVVG rejected your portfolio 3 days before the flight." She watched his expression collapse. "You weren't flying to sign a deal. You were flying to beg for a reconsideration. A reconsideration that was never going to happen." That's a lie," Porter stammered. "I had an appointment." "No, you didn't," Jocelyn replied. "So your lost earnings claim is fraud." She paused. "But that's the smallest of your problems." Roger reached into his briefcase and pulled out a laptop. He set it on the table and angled the screen toward Porter. "Exhibit B," Roger said calmly. "The cabin recording from the Osprey." Porter froze. His face went slack, like a deer staring down the headlights of an oncoming sigh. You recorded it," he croaked. "Video and audio," Jocelyn replied. 4K resolution. Crystal clear sound. She tapped the spacebar. The playback began. There was the cabin. It was Porter stomping down the aisle. Every word, every sneer, every slurred insult captured perfectly. "Look, sweetheart, move to the back where you belong." It showed him kicking the Hermes bag. It showed him screaming at Lydia. It showed Jocelyn sitting with frightening composure, asking him to stop. It showed the captain ordering him to sit down, and Porter bellowing, "I'm Porter Walsh. I always win." When the video ended, the silence in the conference room felt heavy enough to crush a ribcage. Porter's lead lawyer closed his folder slowly. He looked at Porter as if seeing him for the first time and absolutely hating what he saw. "We're done here," the lawyer said, rising from his chair. "I cannot represent a client who lies to me about material evidence." "Sit down," Porter hissed at him. He turned to Jocelyn, panic clawing at his voice. "You can't release that. It's an invasion of privacy." "Actually," Jocelyn said, smoothing her jacket as she stood, "the charter contract you signed, Section 40. Paragraph C states that passengers consent to video monitoring for safety and liability purposes." She tilted her head. "You signed it, Porter. You signed away your privacy the moment you stepped onto my jet." She walked to the door. "I'm counter-suing you for the fuel costs, the legal fees, for defamation, and I'm forwarding this video to the district attorney so they can tack perjury onto your interference charge." Her hand rested on the doorknob. "Oh, and in 10 minutes, I'm releasing the footage to the Daily Chronicle. I think the headline will be, 'The Real Story at 40,000 feet.'" Porter collapsed back into his chair. He looked small. He looked beaten. "Why?" he whispered. "Why go this far?" Jocelyn glanced over her shoulder, her voice serene. "Because you didn't just take a seat, Porter. You tried to take my dignity, and unlike the seat, a faint smile touched her lips. That is not for sale." Then she walked out. As the door clicked shut, Porter Walsh finally understood his life as he knew it was finished. But karma wasn't done yet. The video file incident _K_cabin_chem_Duzo_fort.mp4 wasn't uploaded by Jocelyn herself. She sent it to Marcus, her VP of PR, with just 2 words, correct? The record. At 2:05 p.m., Marcus posted it on Meridian Dynamics' official press page and their X account. By 2:15 p.m., the internet had stopped spinning. The contrast was too sharp, too cinematic for the public to ignore. On one hand, weeks of Porter's interviews, dripping with crocodile tears, portraying himself as the bullied victim of a woke elite. On the other, cold, merciless 4K truth. People watched Porter sneer. They heard him say sweetheart. They heard the sickening thud of the Hermes bag slamming into the bathroom door. They watched Jocelyn's terrifying calm. They saw the captain's unshakable professionalism. And they saw Porter's entire lie dissolve on screen. The fallout. Our one Porter was at an upscale lunch spot in Tribeca, celebrating what he thought had been a triumphant deposition. He refreshed his phone, expecting a message about Jocelyn's settlement offer. Instead, he saw his own name trending. #PorterWalsh, #seat. Snatcher, #SweetheartGate. He tapped the first video link. His blood drained so fast he nearly toppled out of his chair. He watched himself ugly, drunk, entitled broadcast to millions. Around him, the restaurant had fallen eerily quiet. People were staring at their phones, then staring directly at him. The waiter approached. No dessert menu, no politeness. Sir, the manager asks that you settle your bill and leave now. The fallout. Our 24 Helios Capital didn't even wait for a board meeting. The PR blast was immediate, brutal and final, effective immediately. Porter Walsh has been terminated for cause. His behavior does not reflect our values. We extend our apologies to Miss Banks and the crew of the Osprey. When Porter tried to re-enter the building to retrieve his belongings, his access card failed. Security met him right at the revolving door with a cardboard box containing nothing more than a stapler and a photo frame. They never allowed him back inside. The legal blow landed quickly. The $75 million civil suit was dismissed with prejudice the very next morning, but the real devastation came courtesy of the Department of Justice. FBI agent Miller had watched the video as well. The massive gap between Porter's sworn police statement claiming she was the aggressor and the actual footage amounted to a federal felony, making false statements to a federal agent under 18 U.S.C. Section 1001, stacked on top of the interference with flight crew members charge. Porter was arrested again. This time, there was no bail. The judge, after viewing the video and seeing his blatant attempt to frame an innocent woman, deemed him a flight risk and a danger to the community's trust in justice. The personal downfall. 3 weeks later, Catherine came to visit him at the detention center. She sat behind the glass partition. She looked different. Her hair was cut short, no makeup, and somehow lighter, freer. I filed the papers. Porter, she said, her voice echoing through the phone receiver. Catherine, baby, don't do this, Porter pleaded, looking hollowed out in his orange jumpsuit. It's just a rough patch. I'll bounce back. I always do. You're not bouncing back from this, she replied softly. I saw the video. I lived with you, Porter. But watching it, seeing how you looked at her, it's the same way you look at me when you're angry. I'm done being afraid. What about the house, the Hamptons place? He begged. The lawyers say everything will probably be seized, she answered calmly. It'll cover legal fees and the damages owed to Miss Banks. She sighed. I'm taking the dog. Goodbye, Porter. She hung up and walked out, leaving him silently screaming behind the glass. 1 year later, Jocelyn Banks sat in the back of the Osprey on a bright Tuesday morning. She was headed to London to deliver a keynote speech on integrity and leadership. Smooth air today, Miss Banks, Captain Ali said over the intercom. Thanks, Ali, Jocelyn replied, gazing out at the clouds. Her thoughts drifted briefly to Porter Walsh. He had been sentenced to 24 months in federal prison, followed by 3 years of probation. Bankrupt, untouchable. Even the lowest-tier consulting firms wouldn't consider him. The last she heard, he was working at a car wash in New Jersey, trying to chip away at the mountain of debt. He had reached out once, sending a 4-page letter from prison. An apology. A plea for forgiveness. A request that she help him obtain a reduced sentence. Jocelyn never responded. She shredded the letter not out of spite, but because she refused to give him a single ounce more of her emotional energy. Glanced at seat 1A, empty today. She lifted her bag, the battered Hermes Hack 40, and ran her fingers across the faint scuff mark Porter's shoe had left. She could have repaired it. She could have bought 10 new ones. But she kept it as a reminder that dignity isn't measured by the price of your suit or the volume of your voice. It's in knowing exactly who you are when the world tries to push you. Lydia passed by holding a crystal tumbler. Glenfiddich 30, Miss Banks. Jocelyn smiled warm and real. Yes, please, Lydia, and pour one for yourself when we land. Cheers to that, ma'am. The jet banked right, sunlight catching its wings as it climbed higher into the stratosphere, leaving turbulence and noise far, far behind. Porter Walsh thought he was fighting for a seat. What he didn't realize was that he was fighting for his entire life against a woman who held every card on the table. He mistook silence for weakness and a hoodie for poverty. And the price he paid was his marriage, his millions, and ultimately his freedom. In the end, Jocelyn Banks never needed to shout to be heard. She simply let the truth speak for itself. The most expensive thing Porter Walsh ever bought wasn't a first-class ticket. It was the lesson that you never judge a book by its cover, especially when that book owns the entire library. If you enjoyed this high-altitude tale of karma, hit that like button. It truly helps the channel. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss a story. And tell me in the comments, what would you have done if someone stole your seat? See you in the next one.